Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. As a teacher, I was always curious what happens in the classroom next to me. Now being here at the University of Warwick gave me an opportunity to interact with cohort from different parts of the world, and by learning their experiences about teaching and learning and their educational journey, we can have a peek about what happens in the classrooms around the world. Joining us today, we have Ernestine. She is from Cameroon. So thank you very much for joining, Ernestine.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be here, Suyo Dixie, to share my experiences with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Could you tell us more about your country and your hometown?
Yeah, I am Ernestine Chi, and I come from the Republic of Cameroon. Cameroon is situated central west of Africa. It's actually nicknamed Africa in miniature. That's because you're going to find every ethnic group and every cuisine around Africa in Cameroon. So it's a place to visit if you do not want to go around all of Africa. Coming to Cameroon, it's a nice place because you get a sneak peek of Africa through Cameroon. Now, talking about teaching in my context, yeah, Cameroon runs two educational systems or subsystems because Cameroon happens to be a bilingual country. So we run the Anglo-Saxon system of education and a French subsystem of education. I am a proud product of both systems of education, having myself had initial entry into primary, nursery and primary school in the French-speaking system of education, then moving to grade 7 without any form of transition to the Anglo-Saxon system of education, and then getting to the university with a BA in the Anglo-Saxon system of education and an MA in the French subsystem of education, and currently working in a school context that do host both system of educations, and having to switch across the systems because that's also a nice peculiarity. Even though they are Anglo-Saxon schools, the French-speaking schools, there are also schools that are called bilingual schools. So these schools run the both systems of education, and I happen to be working in such a context. And so when I'm in the Anglo-Saxon section of the same school, I do teach French as a foreign language, and then I move to the French-speaking subsystem within the same school. I teach English as a foreign language.
Yeah. Interesting. That's really interesting. Okay, so let's go down the memory lane and start from your childhood. At what age did your education start, and could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's really an interesting question taking me back to that age. I started schooling at the age of 2. My parents did have the craziest idea of sending me off to nursery school. So I did go to my nursery one at the age of 2. I remember how I used to cry my way to school and back. And because my dad who was lucky at the time and not as privileged as his own parents, used to compare his childhood to mine, but he forgot that he went to school probably at the age of 15. I don't remember at what age, or I don't know at what age, but to have gone to school at his time, your hand needed to have crossed over your head to your ear. So probably he should have been 15 when he went to school, and he was trekking thousands of kilometers. And so when I was going to school at the age of 2, he had a car, but he wouldn't accept to drop me off at school. He was comparing his 1,000 kilometers to the very few steps I had to move to get to school, and saying, oh, school is just there so she can go, but not looking at his age and mine. So it was a wonderful experience, crying my way to school at that early age and crying my way back. And I think that's why many persons came to know me, came to know my parents, because they knew this particular child that would cry to school and back.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, is this a general practice that kids are admitted this early in school?
Yeah, it used to be general practice. Kids were admitted quite early in school. Someone like me, I was lucky to be able to move my first steps at the age of 7 months. And by the age of 9 months, I was running on my feet. Before I could get to 1 year, I was talking and making a lot of noise. You probably guessed that I'm a noisemaker. And so at 2, it was just perfect for me to go to school, to kindergarten at the time. And it was common practice. But more of now, very recently, the ministry is trying to put some restrictions on that, and saying children should not be admitted to school in schools before the ages of 5.
Okay. So the school you are speaking about, was this a proper school or a preschool something?
Yeah, at the age of 2, it was a kind of preschool, so it's what is called kindergarten. So if I add it to my 6 years of primary education, then it makes it 8 years of primary schooling. So the kindergarten is 2 years, and that used to be the custom that a child gets into kindergarten 1 or nursery 1, and then nursery 2, and then before moving into class 1. So those pre-ages are ages to prepare you. Yeah, but even now the government feels that sending children to nursery, which is at 2, it's too early. I didn't go to pre-nursery. There's something different that is known as pre-nursery. It's more of a daycare. Yeah, I didn't go to pre-nursery, so I went straight to the nursery school, which is the normal system a child should follow.
So you are saying that even before 2 years of child, there is this preschool nursery system, daycare system.
Yeah, there is this daycare system. Generally, for a child of my age, I should have gone to the daycare system. Yeah. If I wasn't able to talk, but I was. Let me say, I was a little bit bigger than my age, making so much noise, talking a lot, and moving and running up and down. So I was good to go on my feet, and that's why I think my parents thought it wise to get me straight into the nursery school.
Okay. So as I understand, you have this 1 year of daycare system that you skipped. Then you have this 2 years of kindergarten.
Yeah.
And after 2 years of kindergarten, you have 6 years of primary schooling.
Yeah.
Okay. So
that used to be in that is for the French subsystem of education. For the French subsystem of education, they've got 6 years of primary schooling, which is grade 1 to 6. The Anglo-Saxon system of education used to have 7 years of schooling, which will be grade 1 to 7.
Okay.
Now they've revised and kind of harmonized. So both system of education, I think since 2015, run the 6 years program for the primary school, excluding the pre-nursery, which is non-compulsory. So children could actually get into class 1 without having been to the nursery school.
Yeah. Okay, it's almost the same in India as well. So speaking about your primary schooling, was it the same place where you took your kindergarten, or was it a different place?
No, it was the same place. It was actually a public school with a, so it was in the same campus. And I think when I look back, I feel like I might want to accuse some of my teachers, beginning with the teacher who did teach me in kindergarten 2, and the teacher who taught me in maybe class 3. I might want to accuse them for what I have become today. In secondary school, I could accuse others, because I remember at that very tender age, they used to tell me, Ernestine, you're going to be a teacher, and it used to get me annoyed. So how I ended up here, I feel they predicted it and they prophesied, and it just came to pass.
Amazing, amazing. So speaking about your primary schooling, generally how many students are there in one class for primary classes?
Oh, interesting question. Now, I'm going to look at that question from different perspectives. I'm going to look at it from the perspective of urban and rural. So in the urban centers, the classrooms will be somehow crowded, but in rural areas, in some rural areas, there is a kind of paradox. It might not be very crowded in some rural areas, but also super crowded in other rural areas. So it just depends on the geographical placement, location of the school. So if the school is located where there are many schools, then it's not so crowded. But if it's located where there are not so many schools, then it's the lone serving school. You want to imagine the pressure. And I'm wondering, when you asked about the number of pupils and my definition of what is not crowded, whether it does match yours, because when I'm talking of a classroom that is not crowded, I'm talking of a class of a minimum of 50, 60. That is a luxury. I term that as a luxurious classroom. So if a teacher has got 50, 60 people in their classrooms, they're very good to go. In rural settings, they could get 40, 35, then they are living the luxury of their life. If not, we should be talking of 80, 100 and above.
In primary section as well.
Yeah, in primary section as well, depending on where the school is located. So if it's located in an area where there are many schools, then the burdens reduce because the children have more possibilities. But if they are standalone schools and then having to serve 3, 4, 5 communities, then it's got a lot of pressure.
Speaking about you, how many kids were there in your classroom?
In primary school, at the time, I wouldn't really remember, but I think thereabout, if I take the for grade 5 and 6 that I can actually picture, there were about 50 to 60 people in my class.
General average, yeah. And what were the subjects you studied in primary classes?
Oh, in primary school, we did study every subject. That's a peculiarity. So in primary education, up to secondary education, grade 9, Anglo-Saxon system, children don't get to choose subject. Now, in the a French-speaking subsystem of education, there's nothing like choice of subject. So that's also all through up to secondary school. There's nothing like choice of subject. So we call the French subsystem of education jack of all trade, master of none. Now, that speaking globally, I would say up to grade 9 in secondary school, no choice of subject. So in primary school, children study every subject. Now, in my case, French was my medium of instruction and English was a subject for me in primary education.
And you study your mother tongue as a subject?
Interesting question. We should have loved to, I would have loved to, but it becomes a tough question when it comes to my context because Cameroon has got over 286 ethnic groups. That it's a lot of pressure on the government and deciding what mother tongue could be taught in what school. It's a huge challenge for the government. So in order to resolve that, the government has opted for English and French as official languages, as mediums of instructions, so that ethnic tensions are not generated, I want to believe.
Now, just one question more. Thinking about this primary context, is it totally up to you, I mean, students and parents to select this Anglo-Saxon system or French system, or is it something that you have to?
Oh, no, it's up to the parents. So parents do make the decisions for their children. And in the past, in my case, it used to be that people from the Anglo-Saxon cultural background, like my parents, who want to send their children to Anglo-Saxon schools, and parents from the French-speaking subsystem or French-speaking background want to send their children to French medium of instruction schools. Now, what happened in my case, my parents are Anglo-Saxon cultured, because they came from the southern part of Cameroon. But at the time, they were working in East Cameroon and there was no Anglo-Saxon education. And that's why you understand very quickly why they found the need to send me back to their culture. And that's why there was that swift transition from grade 6 to grade 7 French to English subsystem of education. And I had to move and live on school campus. So I was a boarding student, as they call it. So living on school campus, so I could actually learn within my own cultural environment. The situation has changed nowadays. Parents from the French-speaking part of Cameroon are very eager and they are pushing their children into Anglo-Saxon schools. You want to understand why the instrumental benefits of English language.
Interesting. So when you complete these 6 years of your primary schooling, you start your junior high school. What do you call it? Junior high school. Yeah. And is there some exam to go to junior high school? And is it the same location or you have to go to some other school?
Oh, great. Now there is a whole procedure to transit. One, you've got to take the common entrance examination. It's a kind of a national certified examination that gives you entrance into the secondary school. So it's for both system of education, they've got different names. So at the time I did take it in the French subsystem of education. So they call it concours d'entrée en sixième. So it's a national exam. It's not organized by your school. It's organized by the Ministry of Education. And in addition to that, you've also got to take the first school leaving certificate, that's how it's called in the Anglo-Saxon system. In the French subsystem of education, what I took was the Certificat d'études primaires. Yeah, so it's also a national exam. So that common entrance gives you access into secondary schools. But so what happens is the children take people take common entrance in May, and the results come out probably in July, and then just about the same time, June, July, they've got to go for admission into secondary school. So parents decide which school their children want to go to. But for them to be admitted into those colleges, they need to go through interviews. So the interviews generally are made up of a kind of on-campus exam. So you go to the school you want to, and then you take a kind of exam there, and then you go for a kind of interview, and you're admitted into the school. Let me quickly mention that Cameroon, it's a graded system. So when you're taking your common entrance examination in the Anglo-Saxon system, your results are published either as list A, which are the candidates who do well, excellent, and then we have list B, which means average, and yeah. So some schools will only want the list A. What happens to those on the list B? That is for the Anglo-Saxon system of education. Now, for the French-speaking subsystem of education, this same national common entrance examination is not managed by the primary education board. It's managed by the secondary education board, something that I personally find a problem with, in the sense that a people who wants to take these exams decides ahead of time which college they want to go to, which secondary school, and so that's where they're going to take the exam. Even though the exam comes from the national level, but they have to take it in that on that campus.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I want to go to Lycée Bilingue de Correzon, for example, then I take my common entrance examination in Lycée Bilingue de Correzon. And if I pass, then the school could admit me directly. So they admit also students who have high grades, and probably do not admit those who have lower grades. So that's why some schools will have high achieving students and others will have low achieving students. But I said it's problematic because for a child of that age, generally the ages of 10, I want to imagine them being terrified by this environment, getting to be invigilated by secondary school teachers, because that's the whole school where they're sitting for the examinations. It's a strange environment. Unlike in the Anglo-Saxon system of education, the children are taking the exams in their school. It's a national exam. They are taking it on their campuses. They are being invigilated by their own teachers. It's a safe haven for them. They feel a little bit comfortable, and then they only get out with their results to seek admissions into the secondary school, which I think helps them to perform better too.
Just out of curiosity, you spoke about this French system where you have to go to that particular school where you want to get admitted. Imagine I topped that exam and then I changed my mind to go to some other French-speaking school. Is that allowed?
Yeah, it is allowed, but it's going to be very difficult because it's going to be another procedure. You have to get your exams from, and it does happen because the school where you took the exam is not going to absorb all of you. So those of you who are rejected or not given space or told, oh, our space is full, you have to move elsewhere. So you have to go to the school where you took your exams and probably get a transcript, because your certificate comes years later. Get a transcript of the results, the general transcript, and then take it to that school, plus your primary school report card. So it's generally a tough time for parents.
Yeah, I understand. So speaking about you, did you move to some other school?
Oh, yeah. Speaking about me, I did mention that I did transition from the French subsystem of education to the English subsystem of education. And mind you, I went to the English system of education without knowing the word good morning. Good morning was enough to make me walk out of a room.
Mm-hmm.
So, what happened was, just as I mentioned, I had to get my common entrance examination transcript, the general transcript from the school where I took it, because I took it in a French speaking school
Oh, yes.
in the south region of Cameroon where my parents were based at the time. But I got that plus my report cards, and then I had to move to the northwest region, which is where I am culturally from, to take an interview, write an on-campus examination, and then take an interview. You want to imagine what happened during that session. The truth is, I had a script in front of me that I was just looking at it. It was like a blank slate because I couldn't read anything
Yeah.
until the script was taken away from me. And then came that time of the interview. And the principal was talking to me. I don't know. This is one experience I'm never going to forget. Have you ever been in a situation where someone is talking to you and you don't even recognize that the person could be talking to you? So I thought he was probably talking to other persons around me. It couldn't be me because I didn't understand a single word. What I remember from that story, it's the report my dad gave my aunt when we got back home in the mother tongue, because at home we used to speak our mother tongue, so I did understand the mother tongue well. So at home, my dad told my aunt that the principal did advise that this child is still young, she's just 9 years old. My advice to you would be to get her into grade 7, which is primary education. At the time, they used to run a 7-year program. So bring her into grade 7, was in primary education at that time. She can spend 1 year here. She doesn't even recognize I'm talking to her. So she doesn't understand a single word in English. So how do you want to get her to study English? And what I told my dad when I got that was, UP, I'm happy because I'm not going to go to this Anglo-Saxon system of education. I'm going to go back, and I was going to, my plan at the time as a kid was to go to live with my uncle and his children in the littoral region and school in a French-speaking system of education. What my mother vehemently fought against, and she stood her grounds, and in some way, my dad finally moved to another school, talked to the principal. This time around, I didn't have to attend the interview. Talked to the principal, presented my grade, and so I was admitted on probation, on condition that if I do not make it by the end of term 1, which is December, then I will have to be sent back to primary school, or simply moved back to the French system of education, which was good for me. And so I think that was the most disappointing news of my life at the time. When I got news of that, I was so disappointed. I did go to this school, and if I have to tell you my experience on my first day in this school, it's an experience I'm never going to forget. I remember at the time my dad had a 4-wheel drive pickup. So my trunk, which is my suitcase, was at the back, and he took me to that school on a Sunday. It's a boarding school, and then left me at the center of the school and went to meet the principal, because in a boarding school, the staff stay on campus with the students. Went to the principal's house, probably to tell the principal, oh, I've brought the child, she's here, maybe you see her in person, before we could take her to the dormitory. And while I was standing there, one young student walked up to me and said something.
And you can't understand.
And I nodded no. Now, I'm not able to tell you whether she said another thing or she did repeat what she said. I wasn't understanding. And I nodded yes. And then probably she spoke again, and I nodded no. And this time around, she walked away and went to the girls' dormitory. And I want to guess she went there and probably said something like, a deaf and dumb has come to this school. And before I knew it, I was surrounded by a host of students who were jeering at me. And amidst that crowd, just when I was about to cry, I heard one voice shouting, Ernestine, qu'est-ce que tu fais ici? What are you doing here? And then I turned and immediately she spoke French. I don't know what French used to be at the time in the Anglo-Saxon part of Cameroon. That crowd dispelled, and then they knew I wasn't deaf and dumb. It was just an issue of the language. And she asked me, and then that's how I got to that secondary school. And interestingly, I used to ask myself, how did I do it? Because I was given that probation for 3 months. You want to know that at the end of the 3 months, I did great, and I was and I was maintained. I continued the second term, and by the third term, English was my thing. By the time I moved to the next grade, I was now among the top students. How I started reading, it's something that I cannot explain.
But, I mean, all credits to you. You are a brilliant guy. I mean, what you spoke just now, the incident just shows my curiosity. Like when you only students are there, they still speak in English or French. Is that so? Like, I mean, as you spoke your experience, the girl came to you, she spoke something to you. Did she speak in English?
No, she spoke in English. In the Anglo-Saxon parts of Cameroon, typically English is the language that is used alongside maybe Pidgin English. Yeah, so you will find people in Cameroon even nowadays who don't understand English and who don't understand French. So you find someone who is Anglo-Saxon who has no clue of what French is. And in those days, it used to be even worse. So maybe I said something that you didn't take note of. I said when that lady who recognized me, her parents used to work in the South. Yeah. So that's how she knew me, because they were kind of family friends. When immediately she asked me in French, what are you doing here? Where is that? The crowd dispelled.
Yeah.
Not so much because they thought, okay, she's not deaf and dumb. Let me tell you the truth. It was that language that sent the children away at the time. I remember when I used to go home on holidays to my aunts and uncles in the village. My cousins would go out like every normal little child, look for trouble, attack their friends, and then when the friends come towards them, they run back to the house, and then they wake me up. Probably I'm seated in the house, and they tell me, go out. They tell me in the mother tongue, just go out and speak that your French. Let those children be afraid of you.
Oh my God.
And by the time I walked to the door and I just asked them in French, what is the matter? Everybody dispels. So French used to be an unwanted language, a strange language. So yeah, and English also the other way. And even till date, you find people, Cameroon is a bilingual country, but Cameroonians are not. There are many persons who can't express themselves in the other official language.
Yeah. Now, because we have this English medium of instruction schools and something like that. But what happens in this English medium of instruction of school when we are speaking maybe in front of teachers or in the classroom? Kids speak in English, but when they are on the playground speaking to someone in person, they shift to mother tongue or some other common language.
Okay, yeah. In the medium, in this school where I went to, the boarding school, which is an English medium of instruction school, the policy is English is the medium of instruction, but there's another policy which is the English only campus policy. So you are allowed to speak only English. Now, children will not be punished for speaking their mother tongue on campus, but it's also difficult to find someone, you might not find so many friends speaking the same mother tongue with you, given the ethnic diversity. Now, one common language that links us, those of us who are Anglo-Saxon, culturally Anglo-Saxon, to the Nigerians and Sierra Leoneans, it's this Pidgin English, which is strictly forbidden on campus, and children get punished for speaking that. But that's the language you'll find spoken on the streets, in the market. It's a Creole of the English language.
Interesting. So speaking about the subjects, did you study almost the same subjects in junior high school?
Yeah, in the Anglo-Saxon system of education in Cameroon, kids study all subjects up to grade 9.
By all subjects, you mean maths,
The
science,
math, sciences, so they study
history,
all the
sociology?
subjects, yeah.
Mhm.
And since they have English as medium of instruction, they study French as a subject. But when you get to grade 10, the story changes. When we get to grade 10, the Anglo-Saxon system of education where Cameroon borrows the idea from, it's calibrated towards professionalism. So when you get to grade 10, you don't get to study all the subjects any longer because the system prepares you for a profession. So the students are divided into the arts and the sciences. So their core science subjects, the core science subjects, arts students do not take them. The core art subjects, science students do not take them. This is a kind of preparation. So from grade 10 up through 12, they have this preparation into professionalism. So if you either do the arts or the sciences, someone like me, I did the arts. So I didn't do things like physics, I didn't do chemistry from grade 10. Mathematics remains a compulsory subject. Yeah, that things like chemistry, physics, they are taken off, and then biology becomes optional. I did biology, but that's an optional subject for an art student. Now, for my younger sister who did the sciences, she didn't do things like history, literature from grade 10.
So as I get, you have this exam at the end of 6 or 7 years, depending on your system.
Yeah.
Then you have this junior high school and secondary schooling. And at grade 9, you make, at the end of the grade 9, you may need to make the choice about arts and science. And grade 10 goes like that. What happens after that?
Okay, now when you make that choice of arts and science, in the Anglo-Saxon system of education, we've got 2 examinations, national certified examinations that you have to pass. So let me say that it's difficult to talk in my context in terms of grades, because when I want to talk, I want to imagine that in the European context, they'll say, okay, the grades end at 12. But if I have to look at it and look realistically at my context, then I'll say up to grade 13. Because we've got 7 years of secondary education. So at the end of the first 5 years, so in the 5th year of your secondary education, you've got to take what is called the GCE, that's the General Certificate of Examination, ordinary level. So that's for that level, the 5th year of secondary education. You take that exam. The maximum number of subjects that a student is allowed to take for that level, it's 11 subjects. So you take those subjects depending on whether you're in the arts or sciences. So, and the minimum you can that qualifies you for a pass is 4 subjects. So in my time, I did take 9 subjects. And I ended up with 8. If you look very well, you imagine which subject I didn't pass. Maths, of course. I didn't pass in the maths, of course. So once you pass the GC ordinary level, you have 2 years of secondary education again, or high school education, and then you have to take the GC advanced level. Now at the GC advanced level, or from that grade, after from grade 12 and 13, you're allowed to take a maximum of 5 subjects, and to pass, you need to pass 2 subjects. So in my case, I did take 3 subjects, and you want to look at the workload. When I talk in terms of subjects, you do not really get to comprehend, except you are in the Anglo-Saxon system of education, or you do really understand. Because in the ordinary level, someone taking a level subject is actually writing 22 papers for the examinations, plus some practicals for the sciences. Now, at the advanced level, they are doing, someone taking 5 subjects is writing at least 15 papers plus practical. So in my case, I did take 3 subjects. History alone, it's 3 in 1. So I've got a teacher for Cameroon history, a teacher for African history, a teacher for war history, and I have to answer 4 essay questions in each of these papers. So culmination of all of that makes a pass in history. And so you want to imagine for all the 3 subjects. So it's actually calibrated towards professionalism. It goes deeper. So at the end, you take the GC advanced level, which I mentioned. For the French system of education, they need to write 3 national certified examinations in secondary school. So at the end of the 4th year, they take what is known as the BEPC, brevet d'études, and then they have to they don't select subjects. For them, they do every subject. So they are known as master of all, jack of all trades, master of none. So they don't select subjects. They do bits of everything. At the end of the 4th year, they take the BPC, and then they move to grade 10. And at the end of grade 11, which is 2 years after 2 years of study, they take the probatoire. And then after the probatoire, they study for 1 more year and then take the baccalaureate. So all of these exams qualify them for entrance into the university.
And same thing happens if you took Anglo-Saxon education after the 7 years of secondary education.
Yeah, so to get into the university, if you are coming from the Anglo-Saxon background, you need to have that GC ordinary level, which you took in the 5th year of secondary education, and then you need to have the GC advanced level, which you took in the 7th year of secondary education.
And is there any another exam for getting admitted to university?
No other exam now.
The score of these 2 exams.
Yeah, now it will depend, and I think that is my beaten by with the Anglo-Saxon system of education is that it's a graded system of education. Yeah. So your grades per subject kind of limits you, and it also depends on which university you want to attend. Cameroon has 2 Anglo-Saxon universities at the moment. At the time I went to university, it was just 1 Anglo-Saxon system of education. And they say if you don't have a minimum of 5 points in the GC advanced level, you could not be admitted in the University of Boya, which was a lone Anglo-Saxon university. Now, how are those points calculated? At the GC advanced level, the grades go from A to E. So A will be 5 points, E will be 1 point. At the ordinary level, the grades go from A to C. A 3 points, C 1 point. So you need to have at least 5 points to be admitted in Anglo-Saxon university. And then depending on what you want to read, you need some specific number of points per department. So I went to the University of Boya, the Anglo-Saxon university. The French-speaking system of education with the many universities they've got, the limitations are different. One, because they don't grade. So it's not that they don't grade, they also have grades, but they don't, the emphasis is not so much on these grades. So there is an average kind of scoring. So it's generally on 20, 12, 13 people. So if you have anything 10, you're allowed to go to the university for undergraduate studies. And so you have this choice of either going to an Anglo-Saxon university if you meet the requirement, or you go into French.
Irrespective of all your education being in Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah, irrespective. And interestingly, you find that at the University of Yaoundé 1, for example, they've got a faculty of arts with a department of English modern letters and African literature. Yeah, the subjects there are taught in English within the department. But if there are other related subjects you need to pick in other departments, they will be in French. Now, you also find students coming from Anglo-Saxon universities in the French subsystem of in the French-speaking universities, especially the University of Soir, which runs the management, business and management courses. You find a lot of Anglo-Saxon students there. What they just need to do is what they do actually is they attend the lectures in French, then buy translated notes. So those students who have been there before, they kind of do translate notes for them. So they buy the translated notes and they read. You're allowed to write in your language of convenience. So that you could write in English or in French. I beg your pardon, but you want to imagine the disadvantage that goes with that. You're allowed to write in English and in French. What if the lecturer doesn't understand English or doesn't have a good mastery? So I did my MA in that kind of subsystem of education. Yeah, but a little bit kind of different because I went to the International Relations Institute of Cameroon. It's a prestigious institute where diplomats are trained. It's you get there by competitive entrance, and it's not so many candidates. So it's not like the regular universities, the amphitheaters where you find 1,000, 1,500 students taking a lecture in a language they don't understand. I also had this advantage of a French speaking background that I had come from both system or the subsystem of education. Yeah. But I had people who came from the pure Anglo-Saxon system of education studying with me. And so we did help classmates translating the notes for them. And in the exams, they allowed to write in English. Even though I could write in French, I chose to write in English for the lecturers that I knew were able to read English. And for those I wasn't very sure, I would dare to write in French.
Interesting. Now coming to teaching careers. If someone wants to be a teacher in your country, how can he be a teacher?
Oh, interesting question, but I'm not sure it's a straightforward route. Because wanting to become a teacher, it's different from wanting to become an official or a public civil servant teacher. Now, if you want to become a public civil servant teacher, there is just one route to it. You need to sit for a competitive entrance examination into the teacher training colleges. So the higher teacher training college competitive examinations are organized by the Ministry of Higher Education. And if you have a BA or a BSc, then your training will be 2 years. But if you have just a GC advanced level or a baccalaureate, then your training will be 3 years. So if you pass the entrance examination into any of the higher teacher training colleges and the public ones, there are many. You have one at the University of Bamenda, one operating in Sekumba. So they're across the country, about 6 of them that are public. So if you get entrance into any of these, you study for 2 or 3 years, depending on what qualification you have. Then you come out as a public civil servant teacher. You're immediately integrated into the public service. What if you don't make it through this route? And of course, many teachers do not make it through this route because the government is not going to absorb every other person. Yeah. So you could also get into those teacher training colleges on private sponsor. So private sponsor means, it doesn't mean like every other person is paying their school fee, but private sponsor means at the end of it, you're not being absorbed into the public service. Okay. Yeah, because you didn't come in through the procedure that was required. So after that, you go search for your jobs in private schools, and private schools are very fashionable in Cameroon, private and mission schools.
Okay. Now, you spoke about these private schools, mission schools, and public schools. So are these the 3 types of schools that one can find in Cameroon?
Yeah. Yeah. So public schools, they are government owned and run. Private schools, they're owned by individuals, a group of individuals. Mission schools are owned by religious bodies, the Protestant missions, the Catholics, the Presbyterians. So yeah, the Apostolic, they've got a lot of schools. It's fashionable business.
Now speaking about your teacher career, when did your teaching career started? Like what year, and what was your experience?
I left the university in 2006. That was when I had my BA in August 2006. And I started working for a company, a multinational company, at the time in 2007. And I worked as administrative assistant to the general manager. That company is situated south of Cameroon. And one day I got disgruntled, not because I wasn't satisfied with the job, and not because I thought so much about teaching, even though from primary education, from nursery education through primary and secondary, many of my teachers had predicted that I was going to make a good teacher, but I didn't really like teaching. So what happened was that company where I used to work, it's kind of enclosed, and I felt I was compressed as a young girl. I wanted to explore more. I wanted to come out, and especially that was a space where I had been born, and I felt that I didn't want to go back there because it wasn't helping me to progress. It was good for a start, coming out of a university and just landing a job. It's nothing easy to come by. So yeah, I did work there till July 2010, and then there was this burning urge, and I talked to a friend, and she advised me to write the teacher training entrance examination as an escape route. Yeah, it was actually an escape path. And even though I was reluctant, she registered me with her money. That's what I remain grateful for. She registered me with her own money, got me set for the exam, and then I just wrote. And I don't know whether this is good or bad news. I wrote the entrance examination because you could write many, into the Higher Teacher Training College Bamenda. And then I wrote the entrance examination into the Higher College Teacher Training College Yaoundé, and I got the two. And I had to make my decision. She did write, but she didn't pass, and I was like, why didn't God give her one of those? So I went to the teacher training college more as an escape path. I was looking for a way to go back for a tangible reason to quit the job. Yeah, without having my parents on my neck. And I hoped that while I was there, I was going to find my way. But I don't know. Finally, I ended up where I should probably have started.
Interesting. Now, speaking about your teaching career, could you tell some interesting initiatives, maybe you in your classroom, or maybe by your government, or maybe by your institution?
Oh, great. Yeah. So I trained in that school from November to December, and I did graduate in 2013, January 2013. And I was sent to start off work in March 2013 because I'm a public civil servant teacher, so it's direct integration. And then I moved to, I was transferred to the city and then to one rural area where I am currently. Interesting episodes about my teaching career. I really want to search and really find one, but it's tough. I would say, as a teacher, I have had the opportunity to work with international organizations. I think that's what, when I was moved from the West region where I started my career to the center region, the capital city of Cameroon, I started working with international organizations like the British Council and a couple of others. And I think that gave me some exposure, some training. And the US Embassy also get some exposure and some training. Now, what did I make out of these opportunities that I had with these organizations, and that I think keeps me going today? It's the fact that I've been able to impact my community, not just as a teacher, impacting my learners in the classroom through the methodologies I have learned working with these institutions, or having exposure to trainings in and out of country, but also being able to run workshops for teachers across the territory, run online communities of practices, set them up and manage them, but also running what we call community initiatives that targeting problems that students face from their homes and that could be having an impact in their education. One of such projects are things having to do with the sexual and reproductive health. I've worked with the Ministry of Youth Affairs alongside another organization, trying to bring comprehensive sexuality education into secondary school, but also working with community groups. I'm talking about female leader groups, local meetings, female meetings in the community. Why female meetings? Because we know the mothers hold the home. And so if we target the women in their homes, in their meeting houses, they take the information to their homes, and then they build the girls from their homes. By the time those girls come out of the community into the schools, they are prepared to face life ahead. So those I've worked essentially, basically, on those kind of community initiatives that do look at things like sexual and reproductive health, but also topical issues as climate change and its environmental impact in our community.
Interesting. I remember you speaking about your work in the area of disseminating different scholarship opportunities and hosting discussions about that. Could you share about that?
The scholarships, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a couple of opportunities. I'll probably mention the training organized by the British Council under the English Connect project. It was in Ghana. It was on action research. That was the first time I got to know the term about action research. It was the first time I got to know about Richard Smith and the work he's doing. And we're trained to do that kind of job. So in the area of teacher education so far, that's the kind of job I've been doing, working with teachers, supporting them, mentoring them to reflect on their own practices. We are looking forward to a publication that is typically Cameroonian. It's not yet available, but we are probably working on that. So reflecting with the teachers, going to their schools to train them. So it's not just about me telling the teachers, probably, if you do this, it could be better. I actually get into the classroom, then I into their classroom with their permission and the school administration's permission. And I teach the lesson they were supposed to teach on that day. So we are reversing the table. And they observe and give me feedback. Now, what do they stand to benefit? It's difficult for me as a trainer to go into the classroom and give them feedback. They're obviously not going to take it. Now, when I get into their classroom, so if I tell them I'll be coming on this day, we arrange that I come on this day, then I ask them, what lesson were you supposed to teach today? So I don't alter the lesson. If they were supposed to teach reported speech, they tell me it's a reported speech, then I'm going to prepare for reported speech.
Yeah.
So I teach in your classroom, you observe, and probably if other colleagues are free at that time, they join you to observe. And at the end, you have to give feedback to the trainer. So the feedback you're giving, we do believe that in giving feedback, they learn from our mistakes. They learn not to make the same mistakes we made. They learned to copy the good things they saw in our lesson. So that's a kind of way of empowering them to reflect on their own teaching by having to visualize us, but also to be able to reflect on their teaching and see areas that they can improve on their own without having someone to probably tell them, do this. So just look at your teaching and see what worked, what didn't work, what could you do to improve it. So mainly that, I think that's one workshop that has really empowered me. Now in the area of community development, not just looking at the teachers or the school community as the classroom and the school campus, but looking at factors that are outside of the school, but that do have direct influence on what happens in the school. I will talk about the Fulbright Teaching Excellence and Achievement Program, and it's a particular module that I took in that course at the University of Massachusetts. That it was a gender seminar. There was a particular activity, the facilitator, they call it the frontline activity. And it did change my perception of everything. Because we do often assume as teachers that students come into the classroom at the same level, on the same footing. But some children do not just comprehend because they do not have breakfast in the morning. They are not sure about what they're going to eat. So nobody learns on an empty stomach. Those realities are there. So it pulls them back. Some female students have challenges. The issue of early marriage, the issue of menstruation. They have got these challenges that go on with them from the home that come into the classroom and kind of retard them. And so how do we target these issues from the grassroots? This is a kind of skills that this course helped me to build. And upon return, I joined organizations that were working on issues of sexual and reproductive health and things of community impact. I started working on those kind of projects, and that's how, in working with one of these organizations, I got to work with the Ministry of Youth Affairs on these things and design this comprehensive sexuality education for secondary schools.
Interesting. Thank you very much for all these insights. Is there anything else that you want to share?
I think you have you have exhausted everything. Thank you for the question, so insightful, really getting me to think. And maybe at one point I want to ask myself, some of these questions, maybe I need to look at them again deeper, especially the ones about the work I do as teachers, looking at the impact and being able to reflect on that and really see whether it's having an influence, a positive influence or not.
Thank you for sharing your fantastic work. That was really an inspiration for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.